Hello, Jack. What's up, Lily? I'm gonna read a book tonight. See who pops in. What do you think, buddy? Huh? What do you think? Who's gonna come over and say hello? Yikes. That's hot. What's up, Rubber Monkey? Tonight is tonight we do quiet night. Tonight we do book read. No politics, no rambling, no garbage. Just a book read. Quiet it down for a little bit and relax. How you doing? Thanks for the likes. I appreciate it. I don't even know what time it is. It's almost 7. Usually start around 7. Let's see who comes in. I want to drink my tea, but it's too hot. It's way too hot. Where am I at? I'm in Staten Island, New York. In the, I guess, the basement. I don't know. Family room, whatever you want to call this. We have a visitor today. Never been there? You're not missing much. Staten Island is a suburb of New York City. It's 35 miles south of the city. Just okay. I lived here my whole life. I guess it's like anywhere else where people live for a long period of time. They just kind of get used to it. I had a babbling brook playing in the background last week, and one of the guys said that he had to pee the whole time I was reading the book. I thought that was pretty funny. Let's see what else we can come up with.
Let's go help people customize and save with Liberty Mutual. Okay, who sat at my desk?
Love commercials. The wind in the trees, 10 hours of natural white noise. 10 hours of natural white noise. Oh, there you go. We'll lower that just a little bit. What's up, Shane? How are you, my brother? A buddy of mine is a huge Batman fan. My snoring is white noise. You should come to Montana relaxing. Soothe the soul. I bet. I bet. I've always wanted to go to Montana. Montana, Utah, Colorado. Um, to the less populated areas. You want to know something? I don't think I can name a single city in Montana. Nope. I don't think I could. How bad is that? What is up, Gary? How are you? So Shane, I got a buddy who's a Batman fan, big Batman fan. He's been drawing Batman for a while. He's got a Batman digital print that he made on an app like Procreate, hanging in his office. And I showed him your sketch of Batman, and he said, "Wow, tell him that's awesome. Tell him to stop drawing Batman and finish your book." Oh, I couldn't argue. I thought it was funny. Shane, I don't know if you know, I don't think you were here last time. We are reading The Neverending Story. It is book night, and we have a friend with us. If I can just show him real quick. There he is. What's up, Jack? He's a good boy. Jack's a good boy. Almost done. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. G-Cal, what's happening? California, I'm assuming? Probably. Jack. What's up, Stubbs? Hey, girl, hey. Jennifer, welcome in. Just want to stop in and say, hey. What's up, hey? Terry Burnett, welcome in. Stop by, gotta get back to work. Do you, brother? Do you? I'm just hanging out reading a story. I'm gonna wait a little bit. Usually about 7:05 we start. I usually get on about 7 o'clock. But start about 7:05. Gotcha. Have a lovely evening, Stubbs. I wonder what mirror looks like down here. Oh, that's a little more accurate. But does that look any different? Does it really look any different? I don't think it does. Thank you too. Later. Catch you later. Okay. Great to see you. Moved. Good man, bro. Thank you. What's up, Yvonne? A little late for you. How are you, darling? We're doing our read tonight. Looks like I'll be reading to just a few of you. But we'll see. I'm going to wait a couple more minutes. And then I'm going to go. Read, that is. I started reading on lives because I felt like we just needed a bit of a quiet down, a bit of a change, a bit of relaxation, just something to take our mind off stuff, to quiet it down and slow it down for just a moment and just enjoy something wholesome like being read to. Some people like being read to. Some people don't. I am for Ruckus. Good name. Stevie Ray Vaughan. God bless you back. I appreciate that. Thanks for sharing the live, Gary. I had some tea here, but it's definitely way too hot to drink. Oh, thanks, Yvonne. Is that white noise too white? Oh, hi, I forgot. Sorry. Forgot what? To say hi? No sweat, bro. No sweat. It's all good. Sorry, Yvonne. I slurp when I sip. My bad. How's that, Brian? I don't think you'll be having to go to the bathroom. I think you'll be fine with the white noise. What do you think? I think anyway. I don't know how loud it is. Sounds fine. Just rustling through the trees. 10 hours of it. Somebody sat there and recorded the rustling through the trees. 10 hours of it. You gotta love it. People will do anything. They probably just left it in the woods and walked away. Went and got a hamburger and came back a little later. So where we left off last week. Yes, I need my cheaters now. I've been told one too many times that I squint. So there I go with my cheaters. So when we last left off, the crew had been headed to Fantasia to see the childlike Empress, to find out what was going on in Fantasia with the Nothing. That's where we left off. So that's where we will continue momentarily. I'm going to give it another... Can't see what time it is. I'm going to give it another 2 minutes. And then we're going to go. I do solemnly swear that I am up to no good. Max Smiles, welcome in. Again, sorry, Yvonne. I know that slurping is not very nice in England. Tiger Nicky, not Nicky, what's happening? Take care. Good to see you. Okay, you got it. Right back at you. So, let's begin. So like I said, we were in Fantasia going to see the childlike Empress, and we were going to go find out about the Nothing. So we are reading the Neverending Story, as you can see there by the cover. Pretty detailed cover. Not what I remember. The original book, the leather bound. Until next time, slurp away. The leather-bound copy was like $600. I wasn't buying that. So, bear with me. It's been a long week. I'm exhausted, but I don't like missing this. I like being here with you guys. And you guys can hear me okay? You can hear my voice okay? You can hear the dog okay? I'm guessing. Is my voice clear enough at this decibel level? I don't have a mic, like a real mic anyway. All good? Good. Because of their special importance, deliberations concerning the welfare of all of Fantasia were held in the great throne room of the palace, which was situated only a few floors below the Magnolia Pavilion. The large circular room was filled with muffled voices. The 499 best doctors in Fantasia had assembled there and were whispering or murmuring with one another in groups of varying sizes. Each one had examined the childlike empress, some more recently than others, and each had tried to help her with his skill, but none had succeeded. None knew the nature of the cause of her illness, and none could think of a cure for it. Just then the 500th doctor, the most famous in all of Fantasia, whose knowledge was said to embrace every existing medicinal herb, every magic filter, and, and every secret of nature, was examining the patient. He had been with her for several hours, and all his assembled colleagues were eagerly awaiting the result of his examination. Of course, this assembly was nothing like a human medical congress. To be sure, a good many of the inhabitants of Fantasia were more or less human in appearance, but at least as many resembled animals or were even further from the human. The doctors inside the hall were just as varied as the crowd of messengers milling about outside. There were dwarf doctors with white beards and humps. There were fairy doctresses in shimmering silver-blue robes with glittering stars in their hands and feet. Sit's bath had been installed for them. Their hands and they were white snakes who had coiled up on a long table at the center of the room. There were witches, vampires, and ghosts, none of whom are generally reputed to be especially benevolent or conducive to good health. If you are to understand why these last were present, there is one thing you have to know. The childlike empress, as her title indicates, was looked upon as the ruler over all innumerable provinces over the Fantasia Empire, but in reality she was far more than a ruler. She was something entirely different. She didn't rule. She had never used force or made use of her power. She never issued commands, and she never judged anyone. She never interfered with anyone and never had to defend herself against any assailant, for no one would have thought of rebelling against her or of harming her in any way. In her eyes, all subjects were equal. She was simply there in a special way. She was the center of all of Fantasia. And every creature, whether good or bad, beautiful or ugly, merry or solemn, foolish or wise, all owed their existence to her existence. Without her, nothing could have lived, and more than a human body could live if it has lost its heart. All knew this to be so, though no one fully understood her secret. Thus she was respected by all the creatures of the empire, and her health was of equal concern to them all, for her death would have meant the end of them all, and the end of the boundless Fantasia realm. Bastian's thoughts wandered. Suddenly he remembered the long corridor in the hospital where his mother had been operated on. He and his father had sat waiting for hours outside the operating room. Doctors and nurses hurried this way and that. When his father asked about his wife, the answer was always evasive. No one really seemed to know how she was doing. Finally, a bald-headed man in a white smock had come out to them. He looked tired and sad. Much as he regretted it, he said his efforts had been in vain. He had pressed their hands and mumbled something about heartfelt sympathy. After that, everything had changed between Bastian and his father. Not outwardly. Bastian had everything he could have ever wished for. He had a 3-speed bicycle, an electric train, plenty of vitamin pills, 53 books, a golden hamster, an aquarium with tropical fish in it, a small camera, 6 pocket knives, and so forth and so on. But none of all this really meant anything to him. Bastian remembered that his father had often played with him in the past. He had even told him stories. No longer. He couldn't talk to his father anymore. There was an invisible wall around his father, and no one could get through to him. He never found fault, and he never praised. Even when Bastian was put back in school, his father hadn't said anything. He had only looked at him in his sad, absent way, and Bastian felt that, as far as his father was concerned, he wasn't there at all. That was how his father usually made him feel. When they sat in front of the television screen in the evening, Bastian saw that his father wasn't even looking at it, that his thoughts were far away. Or when they both sat there with books, Bastian saw that his father wasn't reading at all. He'd been looking at the same page for hours and had forgotten to turn it. Bastian knew his father was sad. He himself had cried many nights. Sometimes he had been so shaken by sobs that he had to vomit. But little by little, it had passed. And after all, was still there. And after all, he was still there. Why didn't his father ever speak to him? Not about his mother, not about important things, but just for the feel of talking together. If only we knew, said a tall, thin fire sprite with a beard of red flames. If only we knew what her illness is. There's no fever, no swelling, no rash, no inflammation. She just seems to be fading away. No one knows. As he spoke, little clouds of smoke came out of his mouth and formed figures. This time they were question marks. A bedraggled old raven, who looked like a potato with feathers stuck into it in every which way, answered in a croaking voice. He was the head of cold and sore throat specialist. She doesn't cough. She hasn't got a cold. Medically speaking, it's no disease at all. He adjusted his big spectacles on his beak and cast a challenging look around. One thing seems to be obvious, buzzed the scarab. A beetle sometimes known as a pill roller. There is some mysterious connection between her illness and the terrible happenings these messengers from all over Fantasia have been reporting. Oh yes, scoffed an ink goblin. You see mysterious connections everywhere. My dear colleague, pleaded a hollow-cheeked ghost in a long white gown, let's not get personal. Such remarks are quite irrelevant, and please lower your voices. Conversation of this kind were going on in every part of the throne room. It may seem strange that creatures of so many different kinds were able to communicate with one another, but nearly all the inhabitants of Fantasia, even the animals, knew at least two languages, their own, which they spoke only with members of their own species, and which no outsider understood, and the universal language known as High Fantasian. All Fantasians used it, though some in rather peculiar ways. Suddenly all fell silent, for the great double door had opened. In stepped Carrion, the far-famed master of the healer's art. He was what the older times had been called a centaur. He had had the body of a man from the waist up, and that of a horse from the waist down. And I think it's Charon, right? Charon? Charon? What's up, Danielle? I thought it was, I don't know, Charon, Cairon. And Charon was furthermore a black centaur. I think centaur. He hailed from a remote region far to the south, and his human half-self was the color of ebony. Only his curly hair and beard were white, while the horse-like half of him was striped like a zebra. He was wearing a strange hat, plated of reeds. A large golden amulet hung from a chain around his neck, and on his amulet one could make out only two snakes, one light and one dark, which were biting each other's tail, and so forming an oval. Everyone in Fantasia knew what the medallion meant. It was the badge of the one acting on orders from the childlike empress, acting in her name as though she herself were present. It was said to give the bearer mysterious powers, though no one knew exactly what those powers were. Everyone knew its name, Oran, but many who feared to pronounce the name called it the gem or the glory. In other words, the book bore the mark of the childlike empress, the book we were reading. A whispering passed through the throne room, and some of the doctors were heard to cry out. The gem had not been entrusted to anyone for a long, long time. Charon stamped his hooves 2 or 3 times. When the disorder subsided, he said in a deep voice, "Friends, don't be too upset. I shall only be wearing on for a short time. I am merely a go-between. Soon I shall pass the gem on to the one war there." A breathless silence filled the room. I won't try to misrepresent our defeat with high-sounding words. The childlike empress' illness has baffled us all. The one thing we know is that the destruction of Fantasia began at the same time as this illness. We can't even be sure that medicinal science can save her. But is it possible, and I hope none of you will be offended at what I am going to say, it is possible that we who are gathered here, do not possess all knowledge, all wisdom. Indeed, it is my last and only hope that somewhere in this unbounded realm there is being wiser than we are, who can give us help and advice. Of course, this is no more than a possibility, but one thing is certain. The search for the Savior calls for a pathfinder, someone who is capable of finding paths in the pathless wilderness and who will shrink from no danger or hardship. In other words, a hero. And the childlike empress has given me the name of this hero, to whom she entrusts her salvation and ours. His name is Atreyu, and he lives in the grassy ocean beyond the silver mountains. I shall transmit Orin to him and send him on the great quest. Now you know all there is to know. With that, the old centaur thumped out of the room. Those who remained behind exchanged looks of bewilderment. What was this hero's name? One of them asked. Atreyu or something of the kind, said another. Never heard of him, said a third, and all 499 doctors shook their heads in dismay. Now the clock in the belfry struck 10. Bastian was amazed at how quickly the time had passed in class. Every hour seemed to drag on to an eternity. Down below, they would be having history with Mr. Drone, a gangling, ordinary, ill-tempered man, who delighted in holding Bastian up to ridicule because he couldn't remember the dates when certain battles had been fought, or when someone or another had reigned. The glassy ocean behind the silver mountains was many days' journey from the ivory tower. It was actually a prairie, as long and as wide and flat as an ocean, its whole expanse covered with tall, juicy grass, and when the wind blew, great waves passed over it with a sound like troubled water. The people who lived there were known as grass people, or greenskins. They had blue-black hair, which the men, as well as the women, wore long and often in pigtails, and their skin was olive green. They led a hard, frugal life, and their children, girls as well as boys, were brought up to be brave, proud, and generous. They learned to bear heat, cold, and great hardship, and were tested for courage at an early age. This was necessary because the greenskins were a nation of hunters. They obtained everything they needed either from the herd, fibrous prairie grass, or from the purple buffaloes, great herds of which roamed the grassy ocean. These purple buffaloes were about twice the size of a common bulls or cows they had all along. Purplish red hair with silky sheen and enormous horns with tips as hard and sharp as daggers. They were peaceful as a rule, but when they scented danger or thought they were being attacked, they could be as terrible as a natural cataclysm. Only a greenskin would have dared to hunt there, because the beasts, and moreover only a greenskin would have dared to hunt their beasts, and moreover they used no other weapons than bows and arrows. The greenskins were believers in chivalrous combat, and often it was not hunted but the hunter who lost his life. The greenskins loved and honored the purple buffaloes, and held that only those willing to be killed by them had the right to kill them. News of the childlike empress's illness and the danger threatening all of Fantasia had not yet reached the grassy ocean. It was a long, long time since any traveler had visited the tent colonies of the greenskins. The grass was juicier than ever, the days were bright, and the nights were full of stars. All seemed to be well. But one day, a white-haired black centaur appeared, with his hide was dripping with sweat. He seemed totally exhausted, and his bearded face was haggard. On his head he wore a strange hat, plaited of reeds, and around his neck a chain with a large golden amulet hanging from it. It was Charon. He stood in the open space at the center of the successive rings of tents. It was there that the elders had their councils, and that the people danced and sang old songs on feast days. He waited for the greenskins to assemble, but it was only very old men and women and small children, wide-eyed with curiosity, who crowded around him. He stamped his hooves impatiently. "Where are the hunters and huntresses?" he panted, removing his hat and wiping his forehead. A white-haired woman with a baby in her arms replied, They are still hunting. They won't be back for 3 or 4 days." "Is Atreyu with them?" the centaur asked. "Yes, stranger, but how can I be sure that you know him?" "I don't know him. Go and get him now." "Stranger," said an old man on crutches, "he will come unwillingly, because this is his hunt. It starts at sunset. Do you know what that means?" Charon shook his mane and stamped his hooves. "I don't know, and it doesn't matter. He has something more important to do now. You know this sign I am wearing. Go and get him." "We see the gem," said a little girl, "and we know you have come from the childlike empress. But who are you?" "My name is Charon," the centaur growled. "Charon the physician, if that means anything to you." A bent old woman pushed forward and cried out, "Yes, it's true. I recognize him. I saw him once when I was young. He is the greatest and most famous doctor in all of Fantasia." The centaur nodded. "Thank you, my good woman," he said. "And now perhaps one of you will be kind enough to bring this Atreyu here. It is urgent. The life of the childlike empress is at stake." "I'll go," cried a little girl of 5 or 6. She ran away, and a few seconds later she could be seen between the tents, galloping away on saddleless horse. "At last," Charon grumbled. There he fell into a dead faint. When he revived, he didn't know where he was, for all was dark around him. It came to him only a little by little that he was in a large tent, lying on a bed of soft furs. It seemed to be night, for though a cleft in the doctor's curtain, he saw flickering firelight. Holy horseshoes, he muttered and tried to sit up. Actually, that's the wrong voice. I can't picture a centaur saying this, but holy horseshoes, he muttered and tried to sit up. How long have I been lying here? A head looked in through the door opening and pulled back again. Someone said, "Yes, he seems to be awake." Then the curtain was drawn aside and a boy of about 10 stepped in. His long trousers and shoes were soft of buffalo leather. His body was bare from the waist up, but a long purple-red cloak, evidently woven from buffalo hair, hung from his shoulders. His long blue-black hair was gathered together and held back by leather thongs. A few simple white designs were painted on the olive-green skin of his cheeks and forehead. His dark eyes flashed angrily at the intruder, otherwise his features betrayed no emotion of any kind. "What do you want from me, stranger?" he asked. "Why have you come to my tent, and why have you robbed me of my hunt? If I had killed the big buffalo today, and my arrow was already fitted to my bowstring, I'd have been a hunter tomorrow. Now I'll have to wait a whole year. Why?" The old centaur stared at him in concentration. "Am I to take it," he asked, "that you are Atreyu?" "That's right, stranger. Isn't there someone else of the same name? A grown man? An experienced hunter?" "No, I and no one else am Atreyu." Sinking back on his bed of furs, old Karen gasped. "A child! A little boy! Really? The decisions of a childlike empress are hard to fathom." Atreyu waited in impressive silence. "Forgive me, Atreyu," said Karen, controlling his agitation with the greatest difficulty. "I didn't mean to hurt your feelings, but the surprise has been just too great. Frankly, I'm horrified. I don't know what to think. I can't help wondering, did the childlike empress really know what she was doing when she chose a youngster like you? It's clear it's sheer madness. And if she did it intentionally, then... With a violent shake of his head, he blurted out, "No! No! If I had known whom she was sending me to, I'd have refused to entrust you with this mission. I'd have refused." "What mission?" Atreyu asked. "It's monstrous," cried Carrion indignantly. "It's doubtful whether even the greatest, most experienced of heroes could carry out this mission. And you! She's sending you into the unfathomable to look for the unknown. No one can help you. No one can advise you. No one could foresee what you will befall. And yet you must decide at once, immediately, whether or not you accept the mission. There's not a moment to be lost. For 10 days and nights I have galloped almost without rest to reach you. But now I almost wish I hadn't got here. I am very old. I'm at the end of my strength. Give me a drink of water, please." Atreyu brought a pitcher of fresh spring water. The centaur drank deeply, then he wiped his beard and said somewhat more calmly, "Thank you. That was good. I feel better already. Listen to me, Atreyu. You don't have to accept this mission. The childlike empress leaves it entirely up to you. She never gives orders. I'll tell her how it is, and she'll find someone else. She can't have known you were a little boy. She must have got you mixed up with someone else. That's the only possibility and explanation." "What is this mission?" Atreyu asked. "To find a cure for the childlike empress," the centaur answered, "and save Fantasia." "Is she sick?" Atreyu asked in amazement. Carrion told him how it was in the childlike empress and what the messengers had reported from all parts of Fantasia. Atreyu asked many questions, and the centaur answered them to the best of his ability. They talked far into the night. And the more Atreyu learned of the menace facing Fantasia, the more his face, which at first had been so impassive, expressed unveiled horror. "To think," he murmured, finally with his pale lips, "that I knew nothing about it." Karen cast a grave, anxious look at the boy from under his bushy white eyebrows. "Now you know the lie of the land," he said. "And now perhaps you understand why I was so upset when I first laid eyes on you. Still, it was you the childlike empress named. 'Go and find Atreyu,' she said to me. 'I put all my trust in him,' she said. Ask him if he's willing to attempt the great quest for me and for Fantasia. I don't know why she chose you. Maybe only a little boy like you can do whatever has to be done. I don't know, and I cannot advise you." Atreyu sat there with bowed head and made no reply. He realized that this was a far greater task than his hunt. It was doubtful whether the greatest hunter and pathfinder could succeed. How then could he hope? "Well," the centaur asked, "will you?" Atreyu raised his head and looked at him. "I will," he said firmly. Karen nodded gravely. Then he took his chain with the golden amulet from his neck and put it around Atreyu's. "Orin gives you great power," he said solemnly, "but you must not make use of it, for the childlike Empress herself never makes use of her power. Orin will protect you and guide you, but whatever comes your way, you must never interfere, because from this moment on, your own option ceases to count. For now, that same reason, you must go unarmed. You must let what happens happen. Everything must be equal in your eyes, good and evil, beautiful and ugly, foolish and wise, just as it is in the eyes of the childlike Empress. You may only search and inquire, never judge, and always remember that, Atreyu." Orin, Orin, repeatedly with awe. "I will be worthy of the glory. When should I start?" "Immediately," said Karen. "No one knows how long your great quest will be. Every hour may count, even now. Say goodbye to your parents and your brothers and sisters." "I have none," said Atreyu. "My parents were both killed." "I have none," said Atreyu. "My parents were both killed by..." I gotta plug the phone in. It's going dead. "Hey, Shell Bell Gazelle. How you doing?" I can't get the charger to charge the phone. Hello. What's up? Huh? Oh, he's laying on my lap. Alright, where were we? My parents were both killed by a buffalo soon after I was born. I gotta figure out why this thing isn't charging my phone. I think it's the plug. I do. It shouldn't be, but I think it is. You're back. And we're back. I forgot to charge the phone today. I don't know if it's charging. It says it's charging. Let's see if it's charging. Let's see. Where are we? Everywhere and nowhere, said Carrion. From now on, you will be on your own with no one to advise you. And that's how it will be until the end of the great quest, however it may end. Atreyu nodded. Farewell, Carrion. Farewell, Atreyu. And much luck. The boy turned away and was leaving the tent when the centaur called him back. As they stood face to face, the old centaur put both hands on Atreyu's shoulders, looked him into his eye with a respectful smile, and said slowly, "I think I'm beginning to see why the childlike Empress chose you, Atreyu." The boy lowered his head just a little, and then he went out quickly. His horse, Artax, was standing outside the tent. He was small and spotted like a wild horse. His legs were short and stocky, but he was the fastest, most tireless runner far and wide. He was still saddled, and Atreyu had ridden him back from the hunt. Artax, sorry, Artax, Atreyu whispered, patting his neck. We're going far away, far, far away. No one knows if we shall come back. The horse nodded his head and gave a brief snort. Yes, master, he said. But what about your hunt? We're going on a much greater hunt, said Atreyu, swinging himself into the saddle. Wait, master, said the horse. You've forgotten your weapons. Are you going without your bow and arrow? Yes, Artax, said Atreyu. I have to go unarmed because I am bearing the gem. Humph, snorted the horse. And where are we going? Wherever you like, Artax, said Atreyu. From this moment on, we shall be on the great quest. With that, they galloped away and were swallowed up by the darkness. At the same time, in a different part of Fantasia, something happened which went completely unnoticed. Neither Atreyu nor Artax had the slightest inkling of it. On a remote, night-black heath, the darkness condensed into a great shadowy form. It became so dense that even in that moonless, starless night, it came to look like a big black body. Its outlines were still unclear, but it stood on 4 legs, and green fire glowed in the eyes of its huge, shaggy head. It lifted up its great snout and stood for a long while, sniffing the air. Then suddenly it seemed to find the scent of what it was looking for, and a deep, triumphant growl issued from his throat. And off it ran, the starless night, in long, soundless leaps. The clock in the belfry struck 11. From the downstairs corridor arose the shouts of children running out to play in the playground. Bastian was still squatting cross-legged on the mats. His legs had fallen asleep. He was an Indian, after all. He stood up, took his sandwich and an apple out of his satchel, and placed it on the floor. He had pins and needles in his feet, which took some time to wake up. Then he climbed onto the horse and straddled it. He imagined he was Atreyu galloping through the night on Artax's back. He leaned forward and rested his head on the horse's neck. Gee, he cried. Run, Artax! Gee! Then he became frightened. It had been foolish of him to shout so loud. What if someone had heard him? He waited a while and listened, but all he heard was the intermittent shouts from the yard. Feeling rather foolish, he climbed down off the horse. Really, he was behaving like a small child. He unwrapped his sandwich and shinned the apples on his trousers. But just as he was biting into it, he stopped himself. No, he said to himself aloud, I must carefully apportion my provisions. Who knows how long they will have to last me? With a heavy heart, he rewrapped his sandwich and returned to his satchel, along with the apple. Then with a sigh, he settled down on the mats and reached for the book. Morla, the Aged One, is the next chapter. Take a break. I know I make it look easy, but it's not easy to read. It really isn't. Especially trying to read voices, trying to be different characters. It's difficult when you don't really know. There's no pictures showing you who's reading, and there's no title of who it is. It's not like a dialogue. Martina Mack, what's happening? How are you, sweetie? That's the best part. Yeah, I guess, yeah. You think it's the best part? Me reading with different character voices? Well, thank you. I am exhausted though. I'm doing awesome. Thank you. How are you? We're doing great. All good. Where you been? Busy with work? Maybe? Hopefully? Well, I know, Shell, you're working, right? Anyway, me and my cheaters, not now, but yes. Are you working tonight, Shell? Busy with family, and now I'm applying for my master's, so researching schools, and applying for. Nice. Andrea Fleming, what's up, Dre? And applying for scholarships. Nice. Very nice. How are you, Jack? I forget his name. The the wolf-like, green-eyed figure that was dark as night. I forget his name. At the end of it all, it's something with a G, I think. Because we used to say that Jack looked like him, because Jack has bright green eyes. And on my clothes, November 12th, woohoo! November 12th sounds like a lovely day. 11/12, lovely. Jack decided to join me this evening. Shall we press on? Yes, let's. Carry on, the old black centaur sank back on his bed of furs as Artak's hoofbeats were dying away. After so much exertion, he was at the end of his strength. The woman who found him next day in Atreu's tent feared for his life, and when the hunters came home a few days later, he was hardly any better. But he managed, nevertheless, to tell them why Atreu had ridden away and would not be back soon. As they were all fond of the boy, their concern for him made them grave. Still, they were proud that the childlike empress had chosen him for the great quest, though none claimed to understand her choice. Old Charon never went back to the ivory tower, but he didn't die, and he didn't stay with the greenskins in the grassy ocean. His destiny was to lead him over very different and unexpected pathways, but that's another story, and shall be told another time. That same night, Atreu rode to the foot of the Silver Mountain. It was almost morning when he finally stopped to rest. Artax grazed a while and drank water from the small mountain stream. Atreu wrapped himself in his red cloak and slept a few hours. But when the sun rose, they were already on their way. On the first day, they crossed the Silver Mountains, where every road and every trail was known to them, and they made quick progress. When he felt hungry, the boy ate a chunk of dried buffalo meat and 2 little grass seed cakes that he had been carrying in his saddlebag. Originally, they had been intended for his hunt. "Exactly," said Bastian. "The man has to eat now and then." He took his sandwich out of his satchel, unwrapped it, broke it carefully in 2 pieces, wrapped one of them up again, and put it away. Then he ate the other one. Recess was over. Bastian wondered what his class would be doing next. Oh yes, geography with Mrs. Flint. You had to reel off rivers and their tributaries, cities, populations, figures, natural resources, and industries. Bastian shrugged his shoulders and went on reading. Gmork, thank you. Atreu had just discovered a woodland meadow with a brook twining through it, and had dismounted to let Artax drink and graze. Suddenly he heard a loud crackling and thudding in the woods behind him. 3 bark trolls emerged from the woods and came toward him. A cold shiver ran down his spine at the sight of them. The first, having no legs or haunches, was obliged to walk on his hands. The second had a hole in his chest, so big you could see through it. The third hopped on his right foot because the whole left half of him was missing, as if he had been cut through the middle. When they saw the amulet hanging from Atreyu's neck, they nodded to one another and came slowly closer. "Don't be afraid," said the one walking on his hands, and his voice sounded like the groaning of a tree. "We're not exactly pretty to look at, but in this part of Howling Forest, there's no one else left who might warn you. That's why we've come." "Warn?" Atreyu asked. "Against what?" "We've heard about you," moaned the one with the hole in his chest, "and we've been told about your quest. Don't go any further in this direction or you'll be lost." "The same thing will happen to you as it happened to us," sighed the halved one. "Would you like that?" "What has happened to you?" Atreyu asked. "The nothing is spreading," groaned the first. "It's growing and growing. There's more of it every day, if it's possible to speak of more of nothing. All the others fled from the Howling Forest in time, but we didn't want to leave our home. The nothing caught us in our sleep, and this is what it did to us." "Is it very painful?" Atreyu asked. "No," said the second bark troll, the one with the hole in his chest. "You don't need to feel a thing. There's just something missing. And once it gets a hold of you, something more is missing every day. Soon there won't be anything left of us." "In what part of the woods did it begin?" Atreyu asked. "Would you like to see it?" The third troll, who was one half of a troll, turned to his fellow sufferers with a questioning look. When they nodded, he said, "We'll take you to the place where there's a good view of it. But you must promise not to go any closer. If you do, it will pull you in." "All right," said Atreyu, "I promise." The three turned about and made for the edge of the forest, leading Artax by the bridle. Atreyu followed them. For a while they went this way and that way between enormous trees. Then finally they stopped at the foot of the giant tree, so big that 5 grown men holding hands couldn't scarcely have girdled it. "Climb as high as you can," said the legless troll, "and look in the direction of the sunrise. Then you will see, or rather not see it." Atreyu pulled himself up the knots and bumped on the tree. Pulled himself up on the knots and on the bumps of the tree. He reached the lower branches, hoisted himself to the next, climbed and climbed until he lost sight of the ground below him. Higher and higher he went. The trunk grew thinner, and the more closely spaced side branches made it easier to climb. When at last he reached the crown, he turned towards the sunrise, and then he saw it. The tops of the trees nearest him were still green, but the leaves of those farther away seemed to have all lost their color. They were gray. A little further on, the foliage seemed to become strangely transparent, misty, or better still, unreal. And farther still, there was nothing. Absolutely nothing. Not a bare stretch, not darkness, not some lighter color. No, it was something the eyes could not bear, something that made you feel you had gone blind. For no eye can bear the sight of utter nothingness. Atreyu had held his hand before his face and nearly fell off the branch. He clung tight for a moment, then climbed down as fast as he could. He had seen enough. At last he really understood the horror that was spreading through Fantasia. When he reached the foot of the great tree, the great bark trolls had vanished. Atreyu swung himself into the saddle and galloped as fast as Artax would take him in the direction that would take him away from this slowly but irresistibly spreading nothing. By nightfall, he had left Howling Forest far behind him. Only then did he stop to rest. That night a second encounter, which was to give his great quest a new direction, awaited him. He dreamed much more distinctly than before of the purple buffalo he had wanted to kill. This time Atreyu was without his bow and arrow. He felt very, very small, and the buffalo's face filled the whole sky, and the face spoke to him. He couldn't understand every word, but this is the gist of what he had said. If you had killed me, you would be a hunter now. But because you let me live, I can now help you, Atreyu. Listen to me. There is, in Fantasia, a being older than all other beings. In the north, far, far from here, lie the swamps of sadness. In the middle of those swamps, there is a mountain. A tortoise-shell mountain, it's called. There lives Morla, the aged one. Go and see Morla, the aged one. Then Atreyu woke up. The clock in the belfry struck 12. Soon Bastian's classmates would be going down to the gym for their last class of the day. Today they'd probably be playing with the big, heavy medicine ball which Bastian handled so awkwardly that neither of the two teams ever wanted him. And sometimes they played with a small, hard rubber ball that hurt terribly when it was hit to you. Bastian was an easy mark and was always getting his hit full force. Or perhaps they'd be climbing rope, an exercise that Bastian especially detested. Most of the others would be all the way to the top, while he, with his face as red as beet, would be dangling like a sack of flour at the very bottom of the rope, unable to climb as much as a foot. They'd all be laughing their heads off, and Mr. Mange, the gym teacher, had a special stock of Gibbs just for Bastian. Bastian would have given a good deal to be like Atreyu. He'd have shown them. He heaved a deep sigh. Hey, preacher. Nag, mule. Atreyu rode northward, ever northward. He allowed himself and his little horse only the most necessary stops for sleep and food. He rode by day and he rode by night, in the scorching sun and the pelting rain. He looked neither to the left nor to the right and asked no questions. The farther northward he went, the darker it grew. An unchanging, leaden gray twilight filled the days. At night, the northern lights played across the sky. One morning, when time seemed to be standing still in the murky light, he looked out from a hilltop and finally glimpsed the swamps of sadness. Clouds of mist drifted over them. Here and there he distinguished little clumps of trees, their trunks divided at the bottom into 4, 5, or more crooked stilts, which made the trees look like great many-legged crabs standing in the black water. From the brown foliage hung aerial roots resembling motionless tentacles. It was next to impossible to make out where there was solid ground between the pools of water and where there was only a covering of water plants. Artax whined with horror. "Are we going in there, master?" "Yes," said Atreyu. "We must find the tortoise-shell mountain. It's at the center of those swamps." He urged Artax on, and Artax obeyed. Step by step, he tested the firmness of the ground, but that made progress very slow. At length, Atreyu dismounted and led Artax by bridle. Several times the horse sank in, but managed to pull himself loose. But the farther they went into the swamps of sadness, the more sluggish became his movements. He let his head droop and barely dragged himself forward. "Artax," said Atreyu, "what's the matter?" "I don't know, master. I think we should turn back. There's no sense in all this. We're chasing after something you only dreamed about. We won't find anything. Maybe it's too late even now. Maybe the childlike empress is already dead, and everything we're doing is useless. Let us turn back, master." Atreyu was astonished. "Artax," he said, "you've never spoken like this. What's the matter? Are you sick? Maybe I am, said Artex. With every step we take, the sadness grows in my heart. I've lost hope, master, and I feel so heavy, I can't go on. But we must go on, cried Atreyu. Come along, Artax. He tugged at the bridle, but Artax stood still. He had sunk in up to his belly, and he made no further effort to extricate himself. Artax, cried Atreyu, you mustn't let yourself go. Come, pull yourself out, or you'll sink. Leave me, master, said the little horse. I can't make it. Go on alone. Don't bother about me. I can't stand the sadness any more. I want to die. Desperately, Atreyu pulled at the bridle, but the horse sank deeper and deeper. When only his head emerged from the black water, Atreyu looked it in his arms. I'll hold you, Artax, he whispered. I won't let you go under. The little horse uttered one last soft neigh. You can't help me, master. It's all over for me. Neither of us knew what we were getting into. Now we know why they are called the swamps of sadness. It's the sadness that has made me so heavy. That's why I'm sinking. There's no help. But I'm here too, said Atreyu, and I don't feel anything. You're wearing the gem, master, said Artax. It protects you. Then I'll hang it around your neck, Atreyu cried. Maybe it will protect you too. He started taking the chain off his neck. No, the little horse whined. You mustn't do that, master. The glory was entrusted to you. You weren't given permission to pass it on as you see fit. You must carry on the quest without me. Atreyu pressed his face into the horse's cheek. Artax, he whispered. Oh, my Artax. Will you grant me one last wish? The horse asked. Atreyu nodded in silence. Then I beg you to go away. I don't want you to see my end. Will you do me a favor? Will you do me that favor? Slowly Atreyu arose. Half the horse's head was already in the black water. Farewell, Atreyu, my master, he said, and thank you. Atreyu pressed his lips together. He couldn't speak. Once again he nodded to Artax, then he turned away. My daughter was crying. She was crying because she was standing here. I thought she was listening. She wanted to say goodnight. Lonnie, come here, sweetie. I thought you wanted to listen. You wanted to say goodnight? Kid wanted to say goodnight. I started crying too. I'm not going to lie. That's a really powerful moment right there in the book and the story. Come on, baby. Come down and say goodnight. Okay. I thought she was listening, Carl. Bastian was sobbing. He couldn't help it. His eyes filled with tears and he couldn't go on reading. He had to take out his handkerchief and blow his nose before he could go on. Yeah. Atreyu waited and waited. For how long he didn't know. The mist grew thicker and he felt as if he were blind and deaf. It seemed to him that he had been wandering around in circles for hours. He stopped worrying about where to set his foot down, and yet he never sank in above his knees. By some mysterious means, the childlike Empress's amulet led him to the right way. Then suddenly he saw a high, steep mountain ahead of him. Pulling himself up from crag to crag, he climbed to the rounded top. At first he didn't notice what this mountain was made of, but from the top he overlooked the whole mountain, and then he saw London. Lonnie. All right. But from the top he overlooked the whole mountain, and then he saw it consisted of great slabs of tortoiseshell with moss growing out of the crevices between them. He had found the tortoise-shell mountain, but the discovery gave him no pleasure. Now that his faithful little horse was gone, it left him almost indifferent. Still, he would have to find out who this Morla the Aged One was, and where she actually lived. While he was mulling it over, he felt a slight tremor shaking the mountain, and then he heard a hideous wheezing and lip smacking, and a voice that seemed to issue from the innermost bowels of the earth. "Sakes alive, old woman! Somebody crawling around on us!" In a hurry to the end of the ridge where the sounds had come from, Atreyu had slipped on a bed of moss. Since there was nothing for him to hold on to, he slid faster and faster and finally fell off the mountain. Luckily, he landed on a tree, which caught him in its branches. Looking back at the mountain, he saw an enormous cave. Water was splashing and gushing inside, and something was moving. Slowly, the something came out. It looked like a boulder as big as a house. When it came into full sight, Atreyu saw that it was the head attached to a long, wrinkled neck, the head of a turtle. Its eyes were black and as big as ponds. The mouth was dripping with muck and water weeds. This whole tortoise shell mountain, it suddenly dawned on Atreyu, was one enormous beast, a giant swamp turtle. Morla the Aged One. The wheezing, gurgling voice spoke again. "What are you doing here, son?" Atreyu reached for the amulet on his chest and held it in such a way that the great eyes couldn't help seeing it. "Do you recognize this, Morla?" She took a while to answer. "Sakes alive, Orin! We haven't seen that in a long time. Have we, old woman?" "The emblem of the childlike empress, not in a long time." "The childlike empress is sick," said Atreyu. "Do you know that?" "It's all the same to us, isn't it, old woman?" Morla replied. She seemed to be talking to herself, perhaps because she had had no one else to talk to for heaven knows how long. "If we don't save her, she'll die," Atreyu called out. The nothing was spreading everywhere. I've seen it myself. Morla stared at him out of her great empty eyes. "We don't mind, do we, old woman?" "But then we shall die," Atreyu screamed. "Every last one of us." "Sakes alive," said Morla. "But do we care? Nothing matters to us anymore. It's all the same to us." "But you'll be destroyed too, Morla," cried Atreyu angrily. "Or do you expect, because you're so old, to outlive Fantasia?" "Sakes alive," Morla gurgled. "We're old, son, much too old. Lived long enough, seen too much. When you know as much as we do, nothing matters. Things just repeat, day and night, summer and winter. The world is empty and aimless. Everything circles around. Whatever starts up must pass away. Whatever is born must die. It all cancels out. Good and bad, beautiful and ugly. Everything's empty. Nothing is real. Nothing matters." Atreyu didn't know what to say. The Aged One, dark, empty, pond-sized eyes paralyzed his thoughts. After a while, he heard her speak again. "You're young, son. If you were as old as we are, you'd know there's nothing but sadness. Why shouldn't we die? You and I, the childlike empress, the whole lot of us. Anyway, it's all flim-flam, meaningless games. Nothing matters. Leave us in peace, son. Go away." Atreyu tensed his will to fight off the paralysis, that flowed from her eyes. If you know so much, he said, you must know what the childlike empress illness is, and whatever there is a cure for it. We do, don't we, old woman? Morla wheezed. But it's all the same to us whether she's saved or not. So why should we tell you? If it's really the same to you, Atreyu argued, you might just as well tell me. We could, couldn't we, old woman? Mola grunted. But we don't feel like it. Then it's not all the same to you. Then you yourself don't believe what you're saying. After a long silence, he heard a deep gurgling and belching. That must have been some kind of laughter, if Morla, the aged one, was still capable of laughing. In any case, she said, you're a sly one, son, really sly. We haven't had so much fun in a long time, have we, old woman? Sakes alive, it's true, we must just as well tell you. Makes no difference. Should we tell him, old woman? A long silence followed. Atreyu waited anxiously for Morla's answer, taking care not to interrupt the slow, cheerless flow of her thoughts. At last she spoke. Your life is short, son. Ours is long, much too long. But we both live in time. You a short time, we a long time. The childlike empress has always been there, but she's not old. She's always been young. She still is. Her life isn't measured by time, but by names. She needs a new name. She keeps needing new names. Do you know her name, son? No, Atreyu admitted. I never heard it. You couldn't have, said Morla. Not even we can remember it. Yet she has had many names, but they are all forgotten. Over and done with. But without a name, she can't live. All the childlike empress needs is a new name. Then she'll be well again. But it makes no difference whether she gets well or not. She closed her pond-sized eyes and began slowly to pull in her head. Wait, Atreyu cried. Where can she get a new name? Who gives her a new one? Where can I find the name? None of us, Mola gurgled. No inhabitant of Fantasia can give her a new name. So it's hopeless. Sakes alive. It doesn't matter. Nothing matters. Who then? Cried Atreyu in despair. Who can give her a new name that will save her and save us all? Don't make so much noise, said Morla. Leave us in peace and go away. Even we don't know who can give her a name. If you don't know... If you don't know, Atreyu screamed even louder, who does? She opened her eyes one last time. If you weren't wearing the gem, she wheezed, we'd eat you up. Just to have some peace and quiet. Who? Atreyu insisted. Tell me who knows, and I'll leave you in peace forever. It doesn't matter, she replied. But maybe Ulala in the Southern Oracle knows, maybe. She may know. It's all the same to us. How can I get there? You can't get there at all, son, not even in 10,000 days' journey. Your life is too short. You die first. It's too far. In the first place, didn't we, old woman? Sakes alive, son. Give it up. And, most important, leave us in peace. With that, she closed her empty-gazed eyes and pulled her head back into the cave for good. Atreyu knew he would learn no more from her. At the same time, the shadowy being which had condensed out of the darkness of the heath picked up Atreyu's trail and headed for the swamps of sadness. Nothing and no one in all of Fantasia would deflect it from the trail. Bastian had propped his head up on his hands, looking thoughtfully into space. Strange, he said aloud, that no one in all of Fantasia can give the childlike Empress a new name. If it had been just a matter of giving her a name, Bastian could easily have helped her. He was tops at that, but unfortunately he was not in Fantasia, where his talents were needed, and would he even have won him friends and admirers. On the other hand, he was glad not to have been there. Not for anything in the world would he have ventured into such a place as the swamps of sadness. And then this spooky creature of darkness that was chasing Atreyu without his knowing it. Bastian would have liked to warn him, but that was impossible. All he could do was hope and go on reading. And with that, I am going to stop reading. So, pretty good book. I enjoy it. I have never read it before, but it is definitely a good story. I hope I did it justice. That particular part of the book is the part of the book that brings most people to tears. It certainly did bring me to tears reading it. I hope I brought it justice because it is a good book. I hate to think that I didn't read it well. It's written well. Thank you for the follow. That was always the saddest part. I cried. Did you cry when I read it? That's the question I ask. Did you cry when I read it? So hopefully I've intrigued at least the four of you, whoever the four of you are. It looks like Nag, B-Dubs, I can't see who's in here. Nag, Andrea, Gary, B-Dubs. So that's our book for you to read for the night. And my phone's going dead because it's not plugged into this charger properly. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Jay Merrill. My friend's brother's name was Jay Merrill, James Merrill. He actually passed away a few years ago. Glad you caught it. I don't know how much you heard. Yeah, I try to start at 7 on the dot because I don't want to finish too late. If there's any children watching, I want them to be in bed at a reasonable hour. I don't even know what time it is. I can't tell. Just after 8 o'clock. That's good. We made good time. We read just about over an hour and 20 minutes. Yeah, it's a good story. I hope I didn't overdo it with Morla, with the voice of Morla. But that's how she spoke. At least that's how I remember how she spoke. Quiet and soft and monotone and slow. She was a terrible pain in the ass, as I remember. She would sneeze on Atreyu and blow him off the tree. They don't talk about that, but it is a funny part. The first time you saw it, he got blown off the tree because she sneezed. Journey on, it was perfect. Good. I'm glad you enjoyed it. So that's it. So I'm gonna go. I have to go try to mend my daughter's broken heart because I didn't realize that she was coming to say goodnight to her father. I thought she was going to sit here and patiently listen because I had mentioned to her earlier that I like it when she listens. But apparently, she came down here to say goodnight and not to listen. Um, and for that, I have to apologize, and I am truly sorry for it. But it was right at the part of the book that I was so into that I didn't even consider the fact that she was coming to say goodnight. So I will go mend. Hopefully, she forgives me. She'll be all right. So I will say goodnight and tell you guys that I will see you in the morning, bright and early as always at about 5:20, 5:25, give or take. So maybe we will pick this up again on Monday night or Tuesday night. More than likely, it will be Monday night. I will update you guys and let you know. And we can try to get through this book quick and start a new book. I'm looking forward to finishing this one. It's a pretty good journey so far, and I hope you guys are enjoying it. And I will see you guys in the morning, or not, depending on your hour that you wake up. So I'll see you all later on. Have a good night. Thanks a lot for coming in and hanging out for a little while, and I hope that I have been able to relax you and maybe put you at ease for a little while, and we forget about some of the things that are going on, and we just enjoy a story. It's always nice. So I'll see you guys tomorrow. I love you guys. Have a good night. Take care of yourselves and each other. Bye, guys.